You're listening to the Valley Current.
Hey, Nabil.
Hey, Jack. How are you?
Pretty good. How's things going in beautiful San Juan, Puerto Rico?
They're always good. Things are great. How are things with you?
Never any rain, never any clouds. It's always
no. And you know, it's funny. I say, and it's true, I'm the busiest unemployed guy in the world, you know?
No, you're employed. You got your own company. What are you talking about?
I know, but I'm not really employed. You know, I feel like I'm in a boondoggle. I'm having fun, you know?
The last time I checked,
I feel like I'm getting paid to have fun.
The last time I checked, you had 5 employees there working for you.
No. Remember, we fired them all. We shifted LLCs. We went to the one that doesn't require any employees.
No, I have to say we really need to start from ground zero because you have such a unique case. And I keep getting, as I've said to Terry, I don't know if he's going to join us, but I've said this. I keep getting all kinds of people in California saying, I think the taxes in California are crazy. And now there was something in the news saying they think they're going to raise them to 16.5. Did you see that?
I saw that, and it said they really want to do it retroactively. How is that even possible?
I don't know. But
you're the lawyer. Is that even constitutional?
To me, there'll be a lot of litigation out of the gazoo that'll take a long time to figure it out. But in the meantime, they'll collect the taxes, and then they'll do like a refund, which they did one year at the DMV for overtaxing people for their various car licenses or car registrations. But you made a decision, and you made it in kind of a really smart way, and you made it, like, to me, as one of the earliest people to take advantage of what I know to be law 20/22, but I think they changed the code numbers, right? What do they call it now?
It's now called Act 60, but I think the idea is identical.
The idea is that
they keep changing little things around the edges. Like some years they require you to buy property. Some years they don't require it.
Okay.
They do little tweaks around the edges.
Right. So they're trying to get people smart people. I think it goes like this, because as I said to you at one point, they paid for me to come out with my wife to see Puerto Rico, and with the goal of, you will help us duplicate Silicon Valley. And I want to say the western side of the island, but I may have the geography wrong, either east or western. They have some big airfield or something that they're bringing fiber to. I forget the exact name. It's not San Juan downtown where you are. You're kind of downtown San Juan, I think. And we're
not in old San Juan. So to the extent some people would call old San Juan downtown, we're not in old San Juan, which is where the governor's mansion is.
Yes.
But we are in the heart of the high-end hotels and
right. You can walk out your door. You can walk out your door and be in a casino in like 5 minutes, right?
Well, I can be in a casino, unfortunately, in about 1 minute. And the one I like to go to is about 7 minutes away.
Right. I mean, you could walk to a casino if you wanted to, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And there's free drinks and free whatever, and then you can play cards and all that
definitely.
jazz.
Well, that's if you're remotely interested in gambling, you should stay away from the free drinks. But yes, they do. Right. They do try to give you very strong free drinks, which is a bad idea. But
right. So if you're a card counter, which I'm sure you're not, because you make money in smarter ways. But the point that I'm making is that your history is, you're a really smart guy. You graduated from Harvard Business School. You were working at McKinsey. You taught at Harvard Business School. You know how to twirl a spreadsheet. You understand finance. You've taught finance. You got great credentials. And you wake up one morning in Boston or Cambridge or somewhere, and you say, man, these taxes are really getting to me. And I think Massachusetts is lower than California.
Oh, Mass is much lower. You know, everything you said is factually correct, except the part about being a smart guy. I can't let that get away. I don't know if that's the case. I did graduate from Harvard Business School.
Well, you also got all those awards at Harvard.
I did. And
they asked you to come back and teach. I think you're like top 1% there, and it's like 900 in a class, right? Isn't there?
Yeah.
It's a big class.
That's true.
Right?
Unfortunately, that's true.
Well,
People say that means I didn't have enough fun, but in fact, I had a blast.
Well, McKinsey's not an easy place to work or get in.
No, McKinsey is an amazing place to work. I'm very truly privileged to have worked at McKinsey before business school. It was an incredible experience. I've been lucky, Jack. Honestly, I've been lucky. I've landed in a few good places. And then, of course, I was extremely fortunate to be recruited to teach at Harvard Business School. First time around, right after my MBA, I was a young pup, 26 years old, virtually off the boat.
And you were
Lebanon.
single? Were you single or married at that point?
I was single.
Wow, you must have had a lot of those girls.
No, I was in a committed relationship with the lady, the amazing lady who became my wife. But
nice.
I was single, and I was 26. You know, the funny thing is, literally a third of the students were older than me. So that was kind of that was a head trip. Teaching at age 26 at Harvard Business School was a real.
And you were teaching a hard topic, which is corporate finance, right?
I was.
And that's not the easiest topic. And the cases, if I remember I went to Columbia Business School, the cases, the Harvard cases, and then of course there's the Columbia case generator as well. They're complicated cases. I mean, they've got a lot going on.
Look, all the classes at Harvard are serious topics, but finance is arguably the toughest one to teach. It's an interesting thing. It's harder to teach, in my opinion, not necessarily because it's the hardest topic. I mean, obviously, for those of us teaching it, it wasn't really a hard topic. But what's hard about it, Jack, is you're teaching to a broad range of students.
Right.
You're teaching to 25% of the kids who have just come from Wall Street.
Yep.
And you are teaching to some young men and women who have just come out of the military.
Right.
And who have no finance background. You're teaching to people who've done amazing things in the leadership space, but who don't know finance. And that's the challenge. Harvard does not track. So teaching finance to both ends of the spectrum is what makes it challenging. I loved every minute of it.
And I think that spectrum has people that are poets at one end and PhD statisticians at the other.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You've got the poets and you've got the quants.
Right, and the quants can
one organization calls itself Poets and Quants.
And the quants can take a spreadsheet and turn it into like a masterful computer program using macros.
Right, and of course, what they want to do is they want to impress the professor, and they do it at the expense of the poets. They want to, they want to talk the game, and the challenge for the professor is to keep them all honest. Right. To use their knowledge to teach the other.
Right.
Young students. It's a fun experience.
You're sitting there at your home in Cambridge or Boston, and then one day you're signing a check to whoever you're signing a check to, and what happens? Does the light bulb go off or something?
That's a funny story. The end of the story is that I went to my beloved wife of then 30 years. Actually, now we've been married 34 years. Mm-hmm. But then it was a couple of months shy of our 30th wedding anniversary. And I literally said to her, I said, honey, I love you. I want you to know I am moving to Puerto Rico.
Oh, you didn't put in with or without you, did you? It sounds like you almost were there.
It would make me really happy if you came along.
I don't think you can phrase it that way. I think you have to say, honey, I think you would really love taking a vacation in Puerto Rico. And by the way, there's this huge tax benefit if we let the vacation be 183 days out of the year.
I prize honesty above all, Jack. I really do. And I had made up my mind. So I felt the honest thing to do was to tell her the truth, which is I had decided to move to Puerto Rico. It's very funny now, but back then she didn't think it was funny.
You can't say it that way. Geography is a big issue for people.
She said, couples. You're doing what?
I mean, let me tell you what I've learned. What I've learned is that typically couples fight about money, kids, and a long way down third is sex. Because when you get in a committed relationship for a long enough period of time, sex is actually not probably as critical for most couples. I could be corrected on that.
We'll just say we're blessed on all counts.
Yeah, but then number 4 is geography in the sense of how often do you want to travel? Where do you want to go? How much time do you want to spend there? I mean, part of it is if you really get into it, it's the adventure of planning it and then seeing all those plans blow up. But the reason I say that story is I had almost the exact, my previous wife, who's now deceased, sad story, pancreatic cancer, long story. She came to me at the very height of the dot-com, so like 1999, I think on paper I was worth like $300 million on paper.
Nice.
Huge amount.
Nice.
But it was all
Nice.
paper, all these dot-com companies that were like immensely successful. And I started a foundation, a nonprofit called the Foundation for Creativity and Dispute Resolution. I gave a lot of the appreciated stock because, you know, if you give appreciated stock, you get the deduction based on the appreciated
on the fair value, fair value without paying the capital gains, right?
You're like part of a tax. You're like a tax lawyer in your thinking, plus you know finance, so that's good. So she came to me and she said, in her head, she said the community property, that's all community property. She was probably wrong about that because I had done a lot of this before the marriage. But let's leave that aside. Let's do the simple case. She said, I'm moving to Paris with or without you. That was the exact line. I looked at her like, Paris? Why Paris? She said, why not Paris? Paris is beautiful. And I said, I've been to Paris and we've been to Paris and you speak French and I don't. And you like the buttery croissants and I don't. And you know, just a lot of differences, right? She always wanted to be French. I was Italian. She said, well, maybe we could do Italy, but I really want our primary residence to be in Paris. And I found the place in Paris. It was only like $6 million. So she said, you know, let's just take some of that money. Of course, it didn't exist. It was all tied up in the stocks.
It was make-believe, yeah.
Make-believe, but let's go wired. Let's do something. Let's get somebody to buy something or loan against something. Let's do a margin loan or something. And get me $6 million to put for this beautiful top floor Parisian apartment in the Marais. Maybe it's worth $60 million now. I don't know. Who knows what it would be? And I said, I don't want to move to Paris. I'm having too much fun here in Silicon Valley. No, you can retire. You can go teach in Paris. You can do a million things. Let's just go. The world is not going to get better in the United States. She was predicting that in the 1990s here. She was predicting that. And I said,
smart woman, you would have gotten out of the high. Listen, I'll say this. If the U.S. government didn't tax us, you and me, on our global income, Paris would be the place I would want to go. Well, I lived in Paris for a year.
So you get it because you're Lebanese, right?
I'm Lebanese. I'm French educated, so in fact, I learned French long before I learned English. French is really my mother tongue.
So I said, Carol, the with or without you sounds like you're asking for a divorce. She says, no, just what you said. I'm just being clear. I'm just being really clear about my desires. That's why funny. When you said it, the way you said it, I immediately clicked. This was like 20 years ago. And so she went, and I said, I'll visit. So we were kind of married and separated at the same time. And I would go visit her, and I would visit and stay a few weeks. And I could never get into that Paris scene where you get up by like 10:30, you have your French roast coffee, and the plan for the day was what restaurant are we going to for a late lunch? And what's the wine pairing? I couldn't get into it. I just couldn't get into it.
Oh, man, you don't know what you missed.
See, that's my point.
And the thing is the buttery croissant has to be on every other day, because every other day I have to have the most amazing baguette.
Okay, so
with the ham and butter sandwich. Oh my God!
Okay, so you're spoiled.
The jambon de
you
Paris,
would love
the
Carol.
French.
If Carol was still alive. See, now here's how I reframe it. Carol died. Carol ended up moving back from France because, long story, she kind of missed the U.S., but she ended up dying very early. We did end up getting divorced before she died, while she was sort of deciding she was doing other things. But the point that I'll make is that she must have known that her life was ticking away too fast, and she wanted to live that Paris experience. And I could not relate to that, because I always thought, hey, we're going to all live to 100, so we don't have to accelerate anything. So you never know. But the point is, you made the decision, you communicated it well enough to get your wife to move, and then you filled out all the paperwork and you got yourself the decree that gives you 15 years, or what does it give you?
Honestly, I think the decree is longer than that. I think it's 18 minimum. They guarantee you the 18, but I don't think it's closed-ended. I think it's
you get to renew it. Do you pay an annual fee for?
You do pay, and they mess around. We pay right now a $300 fee.
That's cheap.
Which is a joke. It's nothing, exactly. Right. Last year they passed a law that raised the fee, but then they kind of They just amended the law. So, you know, they try to play on the margins, but honestly, you know what, 300, 5,000, and I don't mean, I'm not a rich guy. I was never worth 300 million.
No. You're going to be worth that by time from all those tax savings.
When you're paying a combined, Jack, this is what your clients, this is what your audience has to understand. When you are paying a combined state and federal income tax rate on earned income of 4% combined, you know, they could take their $300 fee. Good luck to them. I love Puerto Rico. I feel like we owe it to them. And then some years they changed the law. Remember I told you every few years they changed the law a little bit. So one year they changed it that you have to make a $5,000 a year charitable contribution. Now, that didn't apply to me because I was grandfathered, but I don't care. I do it anyway. I do 5,000, 10,000. I mean, I want to help the local museum. I want to help the local boys and girls clubs. You want to give back to the community. You know, and I don't mean to say we don't want to accumulate wealth, but we don't want to be greedy.
Right. But
and when you literally go, I was in 50+% marginal because I was not a VC or a PE guy. So I wasn't living off of carried interest. I was paying ordinary income tax plus Massachusetts, plus as a self-employed guy, Social Security for me as an employer and me as an employee. I was at the 50% bracket.
It's a big tax. So my question is, when you think of the numbers, you've probably saved a lot over the 4 years. I won't ask you for exact numbers, but you would not go backwards. You would say this was one of the best decisions you made to get free of both federal and state taxes in exchange for the 4% plus all the administration of getting the paperwork done and proving that you moved.
I have honestly never regretted it. Never regretted that decision. Not at the height of the hurricane, not at the height of the earthquakes. The honest truth, and I use this phrase a lot because it's true, we moved here for the taxes. We're not embarrassed to say that.
Yes.
We stay here for the love of it.
Okay. Because
you fall in love with this place. The people are so nice. The living style is so nice. I mean, the climate is spectacular. I've got an amazing view. I'm right on the water. My place in Miami would be $10 million. I've got 4,000 square feet right on the water.
But what are you seeing right now in the real estate market? Because when I was there, I guess it was about 5 years ago, maybe longer. It was right at the beginning of this law 2025, because I think it came into practice like 2014, 15, like that.
13 it came in, 12, yeah.
So it might have been 2000.
Look, we're seeing the reality is Puerto Rico has been in a downtrend for literally a decade.
Right.
And one of the reasons for Act 2022 was to try to reverse that and bring people in from the mainland who have some wealth, who can create employment, and who can buy property and help revive the economy. And it's working. It honestly surprises me that we don't have the old Ross Perot proverbial sucking sound of people moving here.
Yeah, because somewhere in this, people have gotten the sense that Puerto Rico is a real weak sister in terms of how the U.S. treats it, right?
That's true, but even worse, people refuse to believe that 4% combined is real. And I got to tell you a quick story. I don't want to take too much time, but first time I heard about this, first time I read about it in the Wall Street Journal. Have you ever gotten mad at a newspaper?
Yes.
I literally got mad at the newspaper. I'm screaming at a newspaper.
Yeah.
And I'm telling my beloved wife, how could this reporter be so stupid?
Right.
Doesn't the journal hire editors anymore? Because this is wrong. Doesn't this reporter know that the U.S. government taxes us on global income? So maybe the 4% he's talking about is the state tax rate.
Right.
But what about the federal tax rate? I was convinced the story was inaccurate. You know, this was before fake news became an in word, became in vogue. But if I'd known the word back then, I would have said this is fake news. I literally got mad at the newspaper, threw the paper away, and went about my business. I literally had to read the same story in the Times, the New York Times, Fortune, and Forbes. I later learned.
Is that 2015? Is that when you first saw it back then?
2016, early 2016.
2016.
Maybe
okay.
the very first time, maybe the very first time was late 15, and I wish I had moved in 15. Because I had a great year in 15, and I would have saved myself.
You had to move before June, though, right?
You have to move before June 30 to take advantage of what's called the year of the move exception.
Right.
And I was able to make that work for 2016. I later learned that the Department of Economic Development here in Puerto Rico had actually planted these stories. They weren't advertising, because we all know people are skeptical of what they read in an ad.
Right.
But when it's a reporter writing, it tends to have more credibility. But in my case, I literally had to read it 4 different times before I finally called a lawyer friend of mine in Texas. I'm thinking, Texas, Puerto Rico, they all speak Spanish, right? So I called my lawyer friend in Texas. I said, Lee, do you know anything about this? And he said, not really, but I'm pretty sure my lawyer friend in Miami, Jeff, I'll say his name, you won't mind, Jeff Rubinger, probably knows something about it.
How do you spell his last name? Because people may want to call him. This would be an ad for him.
Well, I'm going to tell you, him and another lawyer, your clients who may be interested, definitely should call. In fact, Jack, you should do a podcast with this next lawyer I'm going to give you the name of. But Jeff Rubinger is Rubinger.
Okay. In Miami?
In Miami.
Okay.
And my friend Lee from Texas said, Rubinger will know. I believe he may have written an article about this.
Okay.
I called Rubinger and he said, absolutely, it's true. It's 4% combined. I said, what about the federal? He said, what you don't understand, and what most Americans don't understand, is Puerto Rico has a special tax treatment because, he doesn't use the word, I use it, because it's effectively a second-class citizenship. In other words, we have a U.S. passport. Puerto Ricans born in Puerto Rico have a U.S. passport. They're U.S. citizens, but they don't vote in the presidential election. It's a territory. It's not a state.
Right.
Because of that status, they pay Puerto Rico income tax. They don't have to pay U.S. federal income tax on what's called Puerto Rico source income. So the feds didn't have to give anything. They didn't have to compromise. The give came from Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico said, whereas we normally charge our people 26% tax rate because we don't get the largesse of the feds, we are going to create this special decree for each individual who fits these criteria. And Rubinger, he's an amazing lawyer, says, look, you need a US-based lawyer because the IRS doesn't trust Puerto Rico lawyers, and you need a Puerto Rico lawyer because the Hacienda, the Puerto Rico Department of Revenue, does not trust American lawyers.
Yes, yes.
So I said, do you have a Puerto Rico lawyer? And he said, absolutely. His name is Edgar Rios, R-I-O-S. And he literally said, Edgar wrote the law. He wrote Act 2022.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And I've got to tell you, Edgar has become a friend. Edgar is one of the smartest lawyers I've ever met. He is so responsive. I went to see Edgar literally the week after this first call. And within, I want to say 60 days, we had satisfied the requirements and literally taken up residence. We had rented an apartment, taken up permanent residence by June 30, which qualified us for the year of the move exception, which meant even though we had just moved mid-year, we would be treated as Puerto Rico residents for the entire year.
Right. That's a good outcome. You flew to San Juan then? Is that what you did from Boston?
Flew to San Juan from Boston, nonstop flights.
Right.
Boston to San Juan on JetBlue, great routing.
Right.
And, you know, we started meeting people. You get your lawyer, you get your accountant. They help you do everything. They help you get your driver's license. We are registered to vote here. We gave up our registration in Massachusetts.
Right. You got to do all the things. You got to do all the things that prove you don't really have a foot in Massachusetts, right?
One of the three criteria you must satisfy is what they call the closer connections test.
Yes.
And closer connection is a list of criteria.
Right.
And, you know, in a way, because remember, I wasn't born and raised in the U.S. I don't have deep, wide family in the U.S. My children were grown up; they were living on their own, so they don't count as a close connection.
Right.
And so things like, do you own property here? Do you have a driver's license? Where do you go to church? Which charities do you give to?
Right.
Where do you vote? Where are you registered to vote?
Right.
And things like that. And,
right.
Do you have a car here? I have a car here. I don't have one in Massachusetts. I own 3 properties here. I own 1 in the mainland. So it's things like that. And that's one of the 3 criteria. The other criterion is what they call the tax home. And the third most specific quantitative criterion is the so-called presence test.
The number of days you're there versus
counts the number of days, exactly.
And you're there definitely more than 183, right?
I am, but you don't actually have to be. There's things, you and I have talked about what they call the perpetual travelers, right?
Yes. Yes.
If you do most of your business overseas, you can actually meet the presence test so long as you are in the U.S. on the mainland fewer than 90 days.
And so you really have to keep track. You really have to be watching.
I keep track religiously. When I showed my lawyer, Edgar, the spreadsheets I keep, the Outlook organizer I keep, he literally said, I've never seen anything so detailed.
Because
I'm an engineer.
You could be audited both by Puerto Rico as well as by the IRS, right? As well as by Massachusetts.
Well, Puerto Rico, yeah, I could be, but that's not the one you worry about.
Yeah.
The one you worry about is the state, Massachusetts, New York, California. They're the ones who don't want to lose the revenue.
Right. But when you look at your investment property that you have in the States, you're going to pay U.S.-based tax on that because that's considered U.S.
Well, you pay your property tax on that. I don't spend time in it.
You don't pay income tax on any of the income tax? You don't have a renter there?
Yeah, I mean, if it's rented, you do pay rental income. But remember, with real estate, I mean,
but you're filing.
Look at number 45. He taught us all. Real estate people don't pay taxes, right? Because you've got the depreciation.
Yeah, but what was I going to say? You file a tax return. But
you have to file a tax return. In fact, you have to file a tax return even if I didn't have the home, because you have to pay Social Security tax on your salary. Be careful. So your people shouldn't panic. I'm not paying the 7.25% on my income.
Yes.
Right? So let's say, we'll use a hypothetical. The way you do this is you create an LLC in Puerto Rico.
Yes.
Okay? Your business is done through the LLC.
Right.
The LLC pays 4% on its income.
Yes.
Then any distributions from the LLC to the LLC's owner, which can be you or your spouse, is tax-free.
Yes.
So you get your dividends from your own LLC tax-free. The LLC pays the 4%. And what you also have to do is you have to pay yourself a salary from the LLC.
Yes.
And that's negotiated. That has to be fair. So let's say you pay yourself $100,000.
Yes.
You do have to pay Social Security on that income.
To the U.S. Because you have Medicare rights in the U.S.
Right, exactly.
You have that.
So that's whatever the cap is, $60,000, $70,000, you pay 7% on that.
Yes.
And so you are paying $7,000, but if you're making $1 million or $2 million, the hedge fund guys that are coming here, they make $5-10 million a year.
Yes.
So it doesn't even show up on the calculator. 7,000 is rounded down to 0%.
But the theory in part, I think, is that you're giving outbound services from Puerto Rico, not to Puerto Rican citizens, not to people on the island, but to people outside of Puerto Rico. If you were doing classes in Puerto Rico for students in Puerto Rico as a professor and taking a student fee, that would be a different kind of deal, right? That would be
precisely, John. Precisely.
Right.
So you have. When I said we were able to qualify,
yes.
Act 2022, now Act 60, specifies it's only available if you are in the export services business.
Right. So they're trying to turn it. I think they're trying to turn it into almost like an Isle of Man or Cayman Islands or Bermuda, like a money management center. Because if I'm giving services to rich people in say California, but I'm doing it from Puerto Rico, and I'm hiring clerks and paralegals and whatnot to give employment in Puerto Rico, they're like, that's great. You're like running a wealth management firm with a legal slant to it. You may be running a consulting firm with an educational slant to it. Somebody else might be running an accounting firm, and you have back office people, say, maybe doing some work. And that would resurrect the island. But when I was there, I never got the sense that this statute was actually causing a lot of change. I got the sense that it was really a very slow process. And the reason I did is there were a couple of really wealthy people from New York who couldn't believe all these numbers. Even that woman who's the famous real estate broker, she's on Shark Tank, Barbara Corcoran, and she said, everyone should live in Puerto Rico. She said, I just don't want to live there. I want to live in New York. And I pay all those taxes because New York has a city tax, county tax, state tax, federal tax, sales tax. I mean, New York City is like the worst place in the world for taxes, if you ask me.
I know. Look, I get it. If somebody's making $100 million a year, and we all know there's plenty of those nowadays, right? I get it. Honestly, I get it. Because those guys are probably paying capital gains, right? They're probably smart enough to shelter a lot of it. They probably don't trade.
Yes.
So if you're, Warren Buffett doesn't, we know, the old saying is he pays less taxes, certainly as a percentage, than his secretary, because he doesn't sell stock, he gives it away. So I get it. And if you're making $100 million and you're paying 20%, you know what? 80 million after tax, you're all right. You're not going to hurt. I get it. I think what this makes sense for is people like me who are somewhere, I've met people literally who make 100 grand. And people say to me, I cannot afford to pay my California taxes. At 100 grand, by the time I pay state and federal, I cannot pay my mortgage.
See, that's a bad thing for California.
Well,
that's a really bad thing for
California. It's a bad tax system when people literally cannot afford their mortgage because the tax rates are so high. Something's wrong with the system.
Right. Right.
If you're making $500,000 and you have to pay $250 a year, I believe that's too much. Now,
yes.
Our government and our media, and I don't want to get into politics, but parts of our government say, oh, you're wealthy at $500,000. Maybe you're wealthy, but you know what? There's plenty of wealthy people who deserve to send their children to private school. They can't afford it.
Right, right.
And so to me, this makes sense for people, call it from the 250 to the 10 million a year.
Yes, yes.
You make 10, 20, 30 million, pay your taxes, stay in California. God love you.
But you like being in San Juan. You like being in a big city. San Juan reminds me of being almost in any big city. I mean,
I'm a big city guy. I lived in a suburb in Massachusetts. You asked me earlier whether I lived in Boston or Cambridge.
Yeah.
I lived in Boston and Cambridge when I was a student, but we quickly moved to the suburbs. We were in a suburb 12 miles west of Boston called Weston, Massachusetts, an amazing suburb to raise children. They have the best public schools, even though our kids did go to private schools, but they have great public schools. And so this is a big change for us, and I love it. You walk down to the Starbucks. The Starbucks is literally a minute from my house. The casino is 1 minute, and the Starbucks is another minute.
How often do your kids visit, or are they there already?
No, they visit. They both have their careers. My son is actually a Silicon Valley guy. He doesn't visit more than a couple times a year because it's hard to get here. There's no one else stops from San Francisco.
No, you gotta go to
our daughter visits 4, 5, 6 times a year.
Okay, but if you're going from San Francisco, my recollection is you go to Miami, and then from Miami you take a flight.
You can go to Miami, New York, Chicago, Boston. Those are the typical suspects, or Atlanta. Those are the typical stopping points.
So how often are you traveling these days?
This year I've literally made one trip.
Wow.
I made one trip on my way to Asia, and COVID hit, so my course got canceled. And I turned around and came back. This year, 2020, all my courses have been on Zoom.
Wow.
From right here.
That's a point to end on, and maybe we'll continue this in a little more detail, but this is actually very detailed as it is. But when you think of delivering courses on Zoom, you could be anywhere. You could be on any
That's the
place.
point. That's the point.
That's the point, right?
This is the era of the internet This is the era of connectedness.
But
we all know that.
But don't you think, this is the punchline one thing, don't you think that Puerto Rico's goal as a sort of game theory, if I can use a little game theory on you, don't you think their goal is to try to get the U.S. to make them a state? Because if enough people follow you and the state starts saying, wait a minute, all those people are not paying taxes anymore. Let's make Puerto Rico a state. Okay, they're going to vote Democratic, but let's just do that and live with it and bring them back into the tax system. Will your decree...
The honest answer is like every other question that involves politics. The answer is always going to be, at least in our country, in our beautiful country, 50% are for and 50% are against. Or maybe it's 47 and 47,
yes,
to quote the infamous 47. And then there's going to be 6 in the middle that don't know what they want.
Right.
So the truth is, there's no hard data. They've done plebiscites or referenda in Puerto Rico.
Yes.
But in those referenda, the turnout is under 10%. So
really?
It doesn't mean anything. Yeah, so you don't know what the people really want. The political parties here are officially, one is for statehood, one is for status quo. The more, I think, important consideration, Jack, and this is as far as I'll get into politics, is it's never going to happen. The reason it's not, diplomatically, I'd say it's not likely to happen, but I would literally go as far as saying it's never going to happen in my lifetime, is simply because of what you just alluded to. As long as the Republicans can block it because they fear that this would mean 2 additional Democrat senators.
Right.
They're not going to let it happen.
Right. Right.
Certainly with a Republican president, they're not going to let it happen.
Don't you think the game theory is very much to make it pressurize people because of enough? Look, Elon Musk announced about a month ago that he's selling all of his California real estate. He didn't say where he was going. Some people joked and said he's going to Mars. I think he's leaving for either Austin, Texas, or Reno, Nevada. Why? There's big factories there. And
a guy like Elon Musk is smart enough. I'd be surprised if he didn't consider Puerto Rico.
Well, that's what I was saying.
And the good Lord knows we have enough sunshine here.
He's got his own jet. So he could say, look, I'm going to revamp Puerto Rico. I'm going to put a factory in Puerto Rico. He could really make a difference in the world, yeah. Make a big difference.
You know who's the other big famous guy who has announced that once his kids are out of the house, he's moving here. And he's already invested literally billions in Puerto Rico.
Yes.
Is John Paulson.
Yes, I met him. I met him during that trip. When I made that trip, he was a
Paulson literally owns
this whole strip.
The strip. I mean, I don't want to say the strip because it's an exaggeration.
Yes.
No, he owns La Concha Hotel. He owns the Condado Vanderbilt, the most beautiful hotel in Puerto Rico.
He's got the best
people. He owns the beautiful piece of land between my apartment and La Concha that he was starting to develop, and then he stopped it. Well, he owns so much. He owns the beautiful resort, the St. Regis Resort.
Right.
In Bahia Beach.
I've been there. Yeah, I've been there.
God, he's invested literally billions.
Yes.
And he has said, once his kids are grown up, I hope I'm not misquoting him.
No, I think you're right. I think you're right.
He's going to move. And when a guy like that does the move, people will take notice. Because when Nabil tells his friends, look, you got to look into this, 4% combined. I've had people I've known my whole life who know I'm, not stupid, say, oh, Nabil, you're misinformed. You must be misinformed. There's federal taxes. And it's like, guys, federal taxes don't apply on Puerto Rico's source income. And they say, no, global income.
You could say, Nabil, they should hire you to do their PR. You should be the pitch man because they don't do a good job. The governor doesn't do a good job.
We'll schedule, I want to introduce you to my friend, Edgar Rios.
Yes, please.
With one of the best known law firms in town. And if you want, we can have a 3-way podcast.
Oh, I think we should do that because I could tell him the funny story of when I went to go visit the federal courthouse there. And
he would really relate to that. They don't like out of town lawyers, do they?
That for the next show, but I think this is a really good show, and thank you for spending the time. And yes, I will do that with you and Edgar, and plus your accountant, and maybe we could get Jeff and Lee to weigh in too, because somewhere in this we got to understand what the mentality is of why people aren't seeing what is so obvious. And maybe it's just because it's a little too far away. And maybe when the jet planes get to be a lot faster, or the electric version.
Look, it's far away.
It's from Miami. You're like an hour from Miami, right?
Exactly. It's not even, I mean, look, it's 3 hours by 2.5 hours. But you can't think of it that way. From New York to Miami is 4 hours.
Yes.
From New York to San Juan is 4 hours.
Yes. Right.
So my point is, if you're going to go to Miami, why stop in Miami?
Yeah, that's what I would say.
Part. If somebody says, look, I'm a New Yorker, I'm not leaving New York. I love New York too, even though I lived in Boston for 30 years. Yes. I love New York. I get it. You want a view of Central Park, God bless you. But if you're going to give up New York to move, to avoid the 10% New York takes,
yes.
For heaven's sake, look into Puerto Rico.
Right, exactly.
That's the part that people don't know. And I think a big part of it is they don't believe it. So we need to explain to people, this is not a scam. It's an opportunity. If you want to call it a loophole, call it a loophole.
No, I think it's real. I think it's legitimate.
I believe I sent you the IRS circular.
Yes,
I mean, the IRS rules are explicit.
And we'll put those to the show notes. But I think you're right. I think it's a great incentive for bringing smart people like you. And I think if there were 50 versions of you in different ways, the movement would really start. And so far, it's not hit that tipping point moment. It'll hit a tipping point moment when all of a sudden everyone's going to wake up and the real estate values are going to shoot way up and all those casinos are going to be busy. And you're going to say, man, I got this apartment for a tiny amount. Now it's like priced like Miami real estate. And so you did the right thing. And I want you to keep your ear to the ground of real estate that you see in your building, because it sounds like a very well-run building there.
It's a nice building, and they got an amazing board president. You know, the board is really.
It's a good place.
It's a great board. My wife is the president of the board.
Good. If you hear of something, let me know.
You got it.
Anyway, we'll do this again. Thanks.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you. I enjoyed it. Good luck.
Bye.
Tune in next time on The Valley Current.